Welcome to the Guide, Not Guru podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Brock. My purpose is to empower women to create authentic, aligned, and abundant lives. After over a decade of mentoring women in business and self-leadership, I found that we don't need to adopt a guru's blueprint. We need guides to help us build our own. So if you're ready to lead and be a work in progress, you've come to the right place. All right, so if you are a frequent listener of the Guide Not Guru podcast, you know I am all about change. I'm all about living in our possibilities and stepping into the life that we're really meant for. And that means we have to go into what's called the growth zone in our life. And you may already be familiar with what the growth zone is and all the signs and symptoms of the journey that it takes to go from the comfort zone to the growth zone. But even if you already know this, I want you to listen with beginner ears again, because I think what happens so often is when we are in our own experience of change and evolution, and although we've invited it in and we're excited by it, about the possibilities, we forget some of the signs and symptoms, the discomfort, the pain, the anxiety, the uncertainty that comes with growing. And although the future state and this next level you and the best version is exciting, there's also this death of the old you that has to happen on the way there. And man, I want to make normal for you all what this looks like to go from the comfort zone to the growth zone. And maybe some tips to even help you hold it a little bit differently to, I think it's Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about when you understand the why, the how is easier, right? So I want to help you understand a little bit more about it so that when you're in the middle of this, you're just oh yeah, Kelly told me this is what's supposed to happen. This is how it looks when you're growing. So I want to walk you through first, just what are the different zones that we live in the human experience, from the comfort zone to the growth zone. And I want to talk a little bit further about that. So the comfort zone is this place that we've been in probably for a while. It's this state of being where a person is living in almost an anxiety neutral condition. Hey, there's already a set of behaviors here. There's already a set of expectations here. I know how I perform here. There's little risk in the comfort zone. It's I feel so safe here because I've been here for so long. And so it feels the same. It feels familiar. It feels grounded. It feels consistent. It feels, easy. You know what to expect. You're not really being tested when you're in your comfort zone. So when I say that, I want you to think about what area of your life feels really predictable and easy right now. Where has it become maybe even mundane? It's just yeah, this is not really causing me stress in this area of our life. Okay. It makes you feel really in control of your environment. And, the issue with this is if we stay in the comfort zone for too long, it limits us from the growth and the things that we want. And in order to get what we want, we always have to have courage. I did an entire episode on courage as the tipping point. To get what we really want, to feel that sense of fulfillment in our life, we have to have the courage to go get it, to leave this comfort zone. And we have to find the motivation to leave this space. So I want you to think about, I just asked you, where do things feel comfortable, predictable, the same, pretty certain? Are you eating the same thing every day? How might that be limiting you? Is your relationship so predictable? Man, what possibilities is that keeping you from in the depth of your intimacy? Did you build that model in your business where it's just the set it and forget it and you know what to expect? Something happens. It's funny, I'm in this obviously entrepreneurial space, and I was actually talking to two of my guy friends recently, and they were telling me about a couple months ago how they were in this big season of just feeling totally complacent, uninspired. And they were just really searching for meaning in their life because They'd gotten so dissatisfied with the fact that everything actually, even in their business, was predictable. It's like, okay, like now I'm bored. And so that comfort zone, although there are times and spaces that we want to get to a comfort zone, we want to be expanding. And we do have to find the motivation to leave it. And, when I was thinking about this, just even like preparing to talk to you all, I was thinking about, oh my gosh, the cost of being in the comfort zone. And I grew up going to college at the beach at UNC Wilmington. And I actually was just there this last weekend, and I texted all my friends and I was like, I do have regrets. I do regret not skipping class and coming to the beach. I regret being worried about my body image because I felt uncomfortable on the beach in a bathing suit with other people when I had body image issues at that time. I was like, man, I was so afraid to be uncomfortable. I missed out on, man, the nights out with my friends and the memories that were made without me. Like, when we stay stuck, we actually do miss opportunities. We miss opportunities that only come in one season at one moment in life. We miss the chance to be fully immersed in our human experience. And I was texting all my girlfriends from college just being like, I regret that. Like, dang, I can't get that back. I can't be 20 again. Like, we have kids and responsibility. We were all joking like, okay, we wish we could all go back, but just for 1 week, and let's bring all the wisdom we've learned, because like we're grateful for the wisdom that's come from growth. But I miss the fact that I missed out on those opportunities. There was a cost of being in the comfort zone. So I want you to think about, like, where again are you feeling safe, predictable? There's no real stress. And also, what's the lack of life and adventure and expansion in that area of your life if you stay in the comfort zone? And when we go to grow, we have to understand something happens. There is actually a nervous system response that happens when we go to grow. And the goal is that we would grow, I've heard it said like Goldilocks. Like, that's the zone of arousal we want to have with our nervous system when we go to grow, because if it's too little and you remain in the comfort zone, you're bored. But if it's too much, you're in the panic zone and you're freaking out, and it's not healthy either. There's this like really beautiful space of growing. And I'm someone who believes in lifelong growing. It excites me to change and expand again. But it's funny because I find myself still chasing, like, not chasing, but it's like I almost forget when I'm in the discomfort again. Oh yeah, that comes with the territory of growing. All right, so we've got this comfort zone. We finally have the courage that it takes to step out. We get this sense of urgency or conviction or motivation or pride. We're like, okay, now I understand the cost. What it's going to take is courage. It absolutely takes courage to step outside of your comfort zone, and you're going to go into what's called the fear zone. You're going to freak out. You're going to have thoughts like, what am I doing? What will they think? I don't have what it takes. You're going to feel anxious and uncertain. You're going to find that you don't feel confident. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, how did I become a beginner again? Like, you're going to find excuses. You're going to worry. And that's just the next natural part of growing. So when it comes, it is not evidence that like, hey, you need to go back to the comfort zone. It's evidence you're on the right path. Like, as human beings, we're wired to survive. And so when those survival things go off in our brain and body, that pain indicator is just like, that danger, 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 danger. Because we often would rather be in the comfort zone, which isn't actually that comfortable. It's just familiar. Because at least it's not uncertain. When you make that investment, when you take a risk and say the truth to your spouse, when you really go for your dreams, when you decide to show up post-baby body to the gym, it's raw and it's vulnerable and it's uncertain and you don't know how you're going to do, and you're met with all of these little physiological things that go off in your body. Take that as a sign you're on the path. It's not a reason to turn backwards. It's a reason that for you to know that you're in the right zone. And when we persevere long enough, when we say, okay, I'm going to feel the feelings and do it anyway, right? When I'm going to have a healthy relationship with the fact that this is just a part of the experience, we go into what's called the learning zone. And when we enter this learning zone, this is where we really start to expand. It's like, okay, man, I used to be really good at kipping pull-ups in my old CrossFit life, right? And now I'm here at my house trying to do burpees, healing from adrenal fatigue, but I need to finally take the step. I'm finding, wow, I can do 10. I can do 12 burpees now. I'm realizing that if I do it this way and take a 30-second break, my, heart rate doesn't go up as high. There ends up being these new skills and this new resilience that comes from facing the challenges. We end up learning a lot more about ourselves. Our self-confidence rises, and that's what brings us to the growth zone. And when we meet this new level of growth zone, it's like the sweet spot. It's like so much joy and aliveness is in the growth zone, because this is the place where we all of a sudden find that sense of accomplishment, and we find new dreams, and we're met with all these new opportunities, and our attitude is positive. When we're growing, we feel resilient, and we feel strong, and we feel like, oh my gosh, I can dream for more things, because you're in this space of like, I'm seeing it pay off. Thinking about like just the physical body piece, it's like when you're in the growth zone, this is where all of a sudden you don't fail at the workout and you're like, oh my gosh, I remember when I started this, like I couldn't even finish it, and now I'm like sustaining. Or this is where you start to see your baby abs, show up. Or this is where you start to, you're like, wow, I'm not finding the coffee withdrawals anymore. I actually am enjoying tea instead of coffee. It's like there's this new level of excitement that comes from the growth zone, and you have become a new normal version of yourself. This like higher, expanded version of you. And I told you, kind of like Goldilocks, you don't want too little and you don't want too much, because if you go too much, if you're just like, you know what? And by the way, I'm a risk taker. I am a naturally inclined risk taker. It's why I know I've been healing my nervous system lately, because I actually have not knowingly gone to the panic zone. I swung too big, too far, too much on the line, that it keeps your nervous system in a state of like freak out at all times, because it never feels a sense of safety. So we don't want to go into emergency mode. We don't want to feel stress or trauma. We don't want to keep that chronically in our bodies. But leaving the comfort zone is important. So I wanted to talk to you about some of the reasons and like benefits to why leaving the comfort zone is worth it. And my favorite one is self-actualization. There's that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's like your basic needs, and it's love and belonging. And then at the top of it is this idea of self-actualization, this ability to achieve your full potential. And to not only be in your full potential, but to see what it does in the lives of others, and through creativity, and through your expression, and through your work in the world. There is nothing like it. I'll never forget my friend Dawn one time saying, what % of your potential do you think you're tapping into right now? We were talking about this, and she said for herself, she was like 10%. 10%. And I remember asking myself that too. It's just like, what % of my potential am I tapping into? I remember feeling this way when I went on to, the island that I'm hosting my retreat on, and I saw Brittany Turner, who owns this island, and I was crying, and I was like, why am I crying? She's like not saying anything at this moment that's like blowing my mind. And I sat with this, I like leaned up against the hallway wall and was like, Kelly, why are you crying? And she's 1 year younger than me. And I looked at her and I thought, I'm seeing what I'm capable of, but I'm not doing. There is a lack of fulfillment when we actually sit with the fact that we've got more potential that hasn't been realized yet. And there's such a level of energy and excitement when we go, I did that. Like, I'm capable of that. When we see ourselves growing and rising and changing and actualizing, seeing our potential become real, there's just nothing like it. There's just nothing like it. One of the other benefits that comes from getting out of the comfort zone is that it allows you to develop what's called a growth mindset. And it's wildly important to be a healthy, happy human for the rest of your life. And there's two different mindsets. There's a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And a fixed mindset, is someone who is saying that my traits, my abilities, my talents, my everything are fixed. Like, oh gosh, I'd love to be an entrepreneur, Kelly, but I didn't have anyone who taught me that. Or that would be like me saying, my parents really never sat down with me and taught me finance. So, I guess that's out in my book. Or this is where Josh could say, oh, I was never really taught how to deal with my emotions as a man. And so I'm just not going to, it's not my capacity. That view of life of because I don't have it, I can't be it. That limits our entire possibilities of our life. Even just saying it makes me feel super deflated and exhausted. But when we start to leave the comfort zone and to find that we don't die, that's the feeling. When you leave the comfort zone, you're like, I'm going to die. I'm pretty sure I'm going to die. I'm going to die if I say the truth about how I really feel. And then you find that you didn't. And you find with a growth mindset that, man, everything is learnable. Everything is teachable. With my own effort and capability, I can improve. What a growth mindset has even taught me is, I used to have this fixed mindset, honestly, about failing. Failing meant I sucked. Failing meant shame. Failing meant, I don't have what it takes. That was the meaning I was making of it. But when I really learned to have a growth mindset around it, it was failing is inevitable. And especially a part of the journey to doing big things with your life. And big things could even just being a more intentional mom. It could be getting your health and fitness together. It's doing something beyond what you're capable of right now. And when I started to look at failures, right? Fail, first attempt in learning. I should expect to fail for the rest of my life, and failing gets to give me lessons in learning so that I learn, I become stronger and more resilient. And that leads me to this next benefit that comes from having even a growth mindset is resiliency and anti-fragility. As a recovering people pleaser and as a recovering, perfectionist, I used to think I would crack, I would break if people didn't like me, that if I messed up, that if I took on too much. Even down to right now, one of my dreams I've just recently admitted out loud is that I want to homeschool our kids. And the minute I say that, you guys, I say that, I am met with the exact same feelings of the fear zone. It's just hey, Kel, okay, that's cute. You don't have what it takes. You hardly have patience for yourself. How are you going to have patience to teach your children? You don't know how to be a teacher. You can't handle a business and be a success in educating them. What if you fail? What if you drop the ball? What if one day they're coming back and being well, I blame my mom and my dad because they're the ones who taught me. I really missed out on this thing. I'm met with the fear zone. But what comes is as you go for your goals, as you go for your dreams, and you start to grow and you don't die, you're oh wait, I didn't die. I'm still standing. I made a mistake, but I course corrected and now I've learned from this thing, and it takes time. You build resiliency. You build this ability to withstand and recover from the difficulties and toughness that comes from life. And so resiliency gives you this ability to have bounce back ability and almost this elasticity and this, I just even recently in my business, I have been experiencing, honestly, some challenges that 6 months to a year ago, had these instances happen to me, I would have crumbled. But because I've continued to grow, I'm not holding them so heavy. It's just okay, what do we need to do to be responsible for this? I'm spending less energy because I have more strength. And that's what happens. And you cannot build your own ability to have resiliency unless you withstand under the pressure. It's what comes from that. And then there's this idea of anti-fragility. And I think this really came from like the government and economics. And anti-fragility means that a system, a person, a company, a system can increase in its capability to thrive actually as a result of stress. You can thrive because of your ability to handle stress and shock and mistakes and failure. It brings me back to what I just said. Like, there are things that I'm able to hold now because I've already held things like this before. When I used to do like macro counting for nutrition, I would just, blow it. The old me would just be like, well, all or nothing, had the brownie, said I wasn't going to do that. So I might as well binge tonight and I'm just going to eat even more. And then I would have even a bigger deficit the next day. But now I have this ability to say, hey, we've recovered so many times. Like, these hard moments, these are the moments that I get the opportunity to rise. I build this strength that makes me less fragile, less able to crush under the pressure. That cannot come in the comfort zone. It has to come from the experience and the reps you get from growing. And then that really brings us to this place. It's called self-efficacy. And I want to define that for you. It is literally your belief in your capabilities. To have self-efficacy means you have a level of confidence in your ability to be capable, to be motivated, to behave different, to show up in a different environment. Like, you trust yourself. And, it's interesting. We watch these people you watch two different people. Person A went through the same trauma, same heartbreak, same illness, same whatever it was as person B. But person B decided to say, I'm going to grow because of this. And they end up in entirely different universes, entirely different lives because of the way they decided to handle the cards that were dealt to them. They have this belief in their capability. And, it's funny, you almost see these successful people, they're almost successful in a bajillion things. Why? Because they're like, well, dang, I just did an Ironman. There's no reason I couldn't start a nonprofit. It's like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I just birthed a baby. I can do anything. Like, the level of self-efficacy and like belief in my own capability, I can do anything hard. Are you kidding me? Y'all, just even thinking about it, I remember going sleepless for 7 months. I was like such a whiny baby. I wrote on Facebook, like, it's been 78 days since I've had more than 2 hours of sleep at night. What a baby. But now that I've gone through that, I'm just like, okay, man, if a baby was ever to happen again, like, I know I won't die. I believe in myself because I overcame it. And so there's just that level of belief in yourself that transfers into so many other areas of your life. So I want to give you just a couple more tips, just honestly, a couple of tips that will help you understand why leaving the comfort zone is worth it. A couple of tips. I'm going to give you 5. So the first tip to making leaving the comfort zone even easier is your ability to reframe stress. So there's no difference actually in your body, physiological, like the symptoms that happen with your breath and your body and your tightness and like your heart rate and your blood pressure. The exact same symptoms in your body show up whether you are anxious or excited. This is why a lot of people get confused with like, is this fear or intuition? Because the same bubbles and butterflies and heartbeat and like physiological things are happening. And so you actually have the ability to say, oh, wait, yeah. This is like a natural symptom that shows up in my body when I'm excited. There's a whole TED talk by Kelly McGonigal, I believe is her name. And she talks about how to make stress your friend. And that heartbeat before you get on stage to public speak, like that's you rising. That's your body preparing you with energy to rise, rather than you saying, this is fear, I should run. So if you know that the same thing happens, whether you're excited or afraid, you can shift it. And you're just like, oh yeah, yay. Knowing that, that's a huge tip. Like if you can change the meaning you make about stress, game changer. So big. The other tip is to understand that our brains do change. There's this thing called neuroplasty. Okay, our brains are neuroplastic, which means our brains are not hardwired. There have been so many little addictive patterns or behaviors that I've had that when I started to change them, they're hard. They're so hard. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm just someone, who has to eat sugar every night, or I'm just someone who needs caffeine, or I'm just someone who needs whatever. But the truth is, every time we do something new and we rep it out, we continue, we are building, two things are happening. We are, number one, building totally new neural pathways in our brain, which is allowing us to fire and wire these new brain cells that make it easier for that to be the way that you see the world. So every time you do it, it counts. It's this neuroplasty. Then every time you're not doing the old thing, those little pathways, those grooves in your brain are starting to disintegrate and to break apart. I learned this from Dr. Caroline Leaf when I did like a 21-day brain detox, like 8 years ago, like a really long time ago. And she showed these little trees that would just grow and then these other ones that would break down. It's like every time you're doing this rep, it's counting. And so every day you're stepping outside of your comfort zone and choosing it again, it's counting. And so that brings me to my next tip, which is so important, which is if you want to make leaving the comfort zone easier and getting into the growth zone, it's to have small, simple, and consistent actions. And I know they're not as sexy. Gosh, big dang goals are beautiful, but it's in the breaking those things down. It's in these tiny little reps that you change your life, because we can't change our life in one big moment. Even this podcast, like y'all, I could tell you, even in this episode, so many things. But it's going to be the one thing that you take away and act on that will change everything, because you can't do 20 things at once. And so it's okay to take, it's not okay, it's even better to take these small, methodical steps. In the book Chasing Cupcakes by Elizabeth Benton, who is one of my amazing friends, and that book changed my life. But she gives this analogy of like a scale with grains of rice. And imagine an entire pound of rice on one side and then none on the other scale. It's totally out of balance, right? It's weighed down by this grain of rice, or by this big thing of rice. And every time you choose a habit, an action to leave the comfort zone and go to the growth zone, dink, you pick up another one. Okay, I'm going to grow again today. Dink. Okay, I'm going to grow today. Dink. And you do it over and over, and you look at the scale and you're like, it's not making a difference. It's not making a difference. And then one day you pick up a grain, you make that one action, and you drop it on the other side, and you watch it wobble and then change. You watch that it tips the scale. That's how we change. And so it's never in these like giant gestures. It's always going to be in these small, simple, and consistent actions that we take to make this person, this idea, this version of ourselves that we want to be, that we want to grow into, real. It's why they count. It's why, like, you having the brownie and you saying you weren't going to do it, it's not time to blow it, because you're just putting more, you're putting more rice back on the heavier side of the scale. It's like, okay, darn, I didn't get that one, but I'm going to still pick it up tomorrow. And I'm going to still win this moment right now by not doing more damage. So that gradual is so important. It also keeps us from going into that panic zone of just like changing too much at one time. So, two other little thoughts that I wanted to add here that have helped me in the past to really go to the growth zone is the growth zone can be really exciting. And so, when I think about growing, it's like, okay, well, why not go ahead and define one big dream you have, one thing you've always wanted to do, and let's just work on that one. So my tip is to think of what's one thing you'd love to make real in your life. One thing. And start taking action on that now. So say it's in 6 months from now, I would love to, wear this outfit. Or 6 months from now, I would love to be at this place in my business or in my life. Or this is the version of myself I want to be. Okay, define that. You've got to define what that is because there's no way of breaking it down into small steps if you don't even know what it is. So it's like, just pick one thing to make real. And then start to break it down into small steps that you can take today. Because it gets exciting. It's exciting to win the moment. It gets exciting to start to see progress pick up. It gets exciting to have a new goal, but you've got to stick with it long enough. But why not do it with something that excites you? And now I'm going to flip the coin with this last idea. This one's going to suck and you're not going to want to listen to me, but this could be the biggest change of your life. And this is to pick one fear and face it. You will grow so freaking much if you would just face your fear. Because when we don't face our fears, when we don't bring them into our world, they are so big and elusive, they are almost consuming. But if we go, okay, what is my fear? My fear is something small, but maybe not for you, I don't know. Going live on Instagram. It's like, every time I think about it, I'm just so scared. What if I mess up? And what if no one watches? And what if I can't get it right? And people are seeing me blah, blah, blah. Okay. So what's the fear? Name it. I do this idea of going to the bottom of your fear and then coming back out. So it's what's the fear? Okay. Well, my fear is that I'll go on and no one will watch and I'll mess it up and it'll look stupid and I won't have the sound and all the stuff. It's okay, anything else? And it's just yeah. And then everyone won't want to buy from me and they'll think I'm dumb and blah, blah, blah. Okay. We get to the bottom of your fear. Is that it? What else is around this fear? So I usually have my clients name the whole thing. I'm okay, is there anything else there? No, I think that's it. Okay. Would that be the worst that could happen? Yeah, that's it. Okay. And then what? Then what? How do you rise out of that? For me, it was walking away from my network marketing business and just being I'm so afraid to take a risk on myself. I don't know what if I have what it takes. What if I go for this and we don't make money? I'm gonna have to live with my parents, and then my parents probably not gonna want me there. I'm gonna tell my friends that can come hang out with me at my parents' house, and then I'm gonna be ashamed, and then people are gonna see that online, and blah 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 blah. Get to the bottom. Okay. Anything else? No, I guess that's it. Okay, then what? And I started to think well, then I guess, I'd save a lot of money by living at home with my parents. My kids would probably be happy to get to be with their grandparents. I honestly would probably find out who my real friends are. I would show my kids what it's like to not die from going for a goal. And then I started to just, again, envision who I'd become on the other side of facing this fear. And all of a sudden, it was less scary. So the moment you go live, the moment you face your fear, it's gonna feel scary. But when you face it, all of a sudden, here's what happens. The next day, hours later, after all the emotional, physiological things that show up, because they will, I was exhausted. I'm exhausted every time I try to be this bigger version of me. The first time, I'm always tired. I'm that wore me out. But then all of a sudden, you realize you didn't die. And you feel so confident. And you're oh my gosh, there's so many things you learned about just all the things I just told you about getting into the growth zone. All of a sudden you believe for more for yourself. You're just I think I can really handle more. And There's just so many gifts. So what I want to make normal on this conversation with you all is the comfort zone. It's okay. And there is always a cost for staying there too long. And it will also always be scary leaving it. Uncertainty and fear is always going to be the very first emotions. There's going to be excuses that show up. When you step over that line with some courage, you're going to be freaking out emotionally, mentally, physically. It's a part of it. Like, don't make it wrong. Make it the sign that it's right. And when you stay resilient and you keep choosing, you're going to go into the learning zone. And you're going to start to have these new awarenesses and really start to build some skills and feel more empowerment. And then you get to the growth zone and you just believe for an entirely different level of reality for yourself. And so I want to make that normal, because the comfort zone does cost us. And there is a cost for not choosing now. Think about for a moment, if you were to do exactly what you did today for the next 5 years, where does that leave you in life? If you were to repeat all the thoughts and feelings and behaviors, that is inevitable if you don't make a conscious choice to choose, right? To grow. And now imagine that you say, I'm just going to get better every single day. I'm going to have a step of courage. I'm going to go for this. That is called the compound effect. You're not even the same version every other day. You're this whole new, different, elevated version every single time you're having a day. Like, your possibilities are so big and endless. So it's worth leaving the comfort zone. It's worth the risk. It's worth the courage. And I hope to see more of you just know what it actually feels like, so that you don't feel alone in it, that you actually feel inspired by it. So y'all, if this episode excites you and it just encouraged you, my goal is to reach as many people as possible, because I know what I'm saying counts and I know it can help other people. So my request of you, I love this idea of reciprocity, reciprocal. So if this added value to you, would you consider adding value back? Would you leave a review? Would you direct message this to a friend? Would you take a screenshot and tag us online? There is this idea of reciprocity. And if you know anything about energy, what you give out comes back to you. And so I want more to come back to you too. And I hope that this was a value add to you guys today. So I can't wait to be in the DMs and hang out and connect and hear all the ways that you're having the courage to leave the comfort zone. Hey friend, thank you for listening. My goal is to empower as many women as possible. If this episode supported you in any way, I would love it if you'd leave me a review or let me know on Instagram. You can take a screenshot or tag me or just shoot me a DM. If you're looking for any kind of additional support, don't hesitate to reach out. See you here next Tuesday.